the first thing, and if you like to take notes, you'll see these in the notes today. But the first thing that's very, very foundational in our discussion of how to become a media magnet. How do you yourself, your brand, your client, how do you get a continuous flow of incoming requests from the media? And foundational to that is our perspective on our relationship with the media. And so the first point that I want to mention to you today is that every type of media, whether it's newspapers, radio, TV, blogs, websites of any kind, magazines, they all depend on advertising or subscribers. They all have to make a profit, and the way they make a profit is either subscription or advertising based. And in order to sell advertising or get subscribers, they've got to have one thing, and that's content. They've got to have great content so that people want to watch, people want to listen, people want to read that content. And so the reason why this is foundational is when we realize that what we, in offering stories or offering clients to the media, when we're helping them get great content, it kind of changes our perspective. I learned it when I was 12 years old. I played Little League Baseball in Melbourne Beach, Florida. And one of the local newspapers at that time, the Melbourne Times, every week would run stories with the highlights from all the Little League Baseball games. That tells you how little news there was back when I was 12. I mean, that's 20 years ago, but I still remember it. And I would love to get those clippings. And there it would say, Bruce Cadle got 2 hits at 3 at-bats. And I go, oh, cool, my name's in the paper. And interestingly enough, my mother, who was always my biggest supporter till the day that she left this earth, my mother would always buy, on whatever day that came out in the paper, she would always buy extra copies of the paper. And she'd give a copy to my grandparents, and she'd send a copy to old friends in West Virginia, and she'd share that. Look, Bruce, like every other kid that played Little League's name was in the paper too, but she loved to see that. And as I look back, I realized, why would a paper, even in a smaller town and a small paper, why would they do that? Because they need content, and they need content specifically that is going to attract readers. And extra copies than other moms probably bought extra copies. And from that little bit of knowledge when I was 12 years old, I started doing magic tricks as a kid. And I first just did some tricks at home, and then I did some for my class at school. And because I knew that media of all types needed content, I thought, well, gee, I'm going to go do my first public show at the library. I'll let our newspaper know. Well, I got a half-page article in the newspaper. When I was 13, I noticed that on the daily syndicated show back then, Bozo's Big Top, you might remember, that they would often have magicians on. So I contacted the producer of Bozo, and I said, hey, I'm a magician, I'm 13 years old, I'd like to be on your show. And they said, great, here's our availability, and they scheduled me. And so from early on, literally age 12 and 13, I found that media needed content, and all I had to do was provide them with content, and they would give me lots of publicity. And so the second aspect of that is that as we do that, we're serving the media, we're not trying to sell the media. I hate sales. I hate pitching media. I just hate doing that. I don't like that attitude of I'm trying to convince them to do something, or I'm trying to sell them on my idea or my brand or my website, my new business. I hate pitching the media, but I love serving. I love having a great relationship with people. And so by viewing the media as needing great content and viewing ourselves, or in your cases, many of your clients, as people that can provide that great content, the great stories, then it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship. It's no longer an adversarial relationship. I got to pitch them. It's I'm providing them with something. I'm serving them. I want to set them up to succeed. And if they succeed, they're going to help me succeed. And how many of you know a mutually beneficial relationship is a lot more fun than an adversarial relationship. It's a lot more fun than a unilateral relationship. And mutually beneficial relationships usually last a lot longer. And I love that. Valerie and I are going down to a little hotel on the beach. A client of mine owns a little hotel there, and we're going down later this month for a week and just stay at a little place on the beach there. And when we were talking about it, I said, I don't think this is the place that Elaine Hines used to tell me about. Elaine was always saying she and her husband had this favorite little getaway, little kind of small place on Vero Beach that they loved to go to. And Valerie said, who's Elaine Hines? I said, oh, she was the reporter for the NBC affiliate out of Orlando. And then it dawned on me, I haven't seen Elaine Hines in 20 years. She moved out of the area, but Elaine used to interview me over and over and over and over. And whenever we'd meet, she'd always call and say, hey, are you available today? We want to break something at 5 o'clock. And I'd go out for live news on the NBC affiliate. And when we'd meet, while the cameramen were getting set up and the truck was getting the satellite ready for the upload and everything, we would just stand there and talk and get to know each other. And so having that relationship made it fun. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to try to convince Elaine to show my story. No, it was a mutually beneficial relationship. Our newspaper up in Melbourne is Florida Today, and one of their reporters that covered a nonprofit organization that I led years ago, she always covered our stories, and she'd say, let me know when anything's going to happen. Call me. Let me be the first one there. Let me know. And so I'd always let her know. And she'd come out and give us lots and lots of coverage. Well, she got transferred out of state, and before she left, she took me out to lunch. No agenda other than just a talk about all the coverage and the things that she'd reported on over the previous couple of years. That's a great relationship. I love that. I've done a radio show out of Chicago. It's a 1-hour talk show. It was only one guest. And I've been on that radio show over and over and over because I did the interview, the first interview. We talked as soon as the show went off the air. We kept talking. And I friended her on Facebook. And I've sent her some other information I thought she'd be interested in. And so guess who she calls when, oh, hey, we're doing this thing. Would you be available to be a guest again? Sure. Or, hey, somebody just dropped out of our schedule. Are you available? Well, sure. And so here's, Chicago, major market. Hour radio interviews over and over because of a relationship. So now I want to talk, as we look at this, how to become a media magnet, I want to talk about 5 reasons why you or your clients should seek to be a big fish in a small pond. Why should we focus on local publicity? And I'll be honest with you, almost anything I've been involved with, whether it's my own brands, but nonprofits that I've led, I wanted national publicity. In fact, I wrote a book 4 years ago. It was my first book, and I didn't know anything about marketing books. I knew about marketing. I knew about social media. In fact, I did my book launch on Facebook as a live event, and people participated, and we had giveaways and things on Facebook, and made 4 of Amazon's bestseller list in the first week from all of that. But I didn't have a clue about doing book signings or any of the traditional things that authors use. So I went to a seminar by an author, and she had multiple successfully published books. She did lots of workshops with other authors, teaching them kind of how to market your book. And so I went to her seminar, and I was so excited because my book had already come out, and I had big plans for my national media plans. And it was real hands-on, so she had us go around the room, and she said, what I want you to do is just, tell who you are, tell what your book is, and tell what's your marketing plan. How are you going to get the word out? Well, I had a marketing plan. Other people were like, well, I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, I'd like to, Well, I had a plan. I was excited. And so she got to me, and I said, well, here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going after this major media. I'm going after this network. I'm going after this and this and this and this and this. And I was so excited, and I really wanted to hear what she had to say. Until she said it. Because what she said after hearing my illustrious plan, she said, well, you'd be better off becoming a big fish in a small pond than a small pond among the big fish all over America. That's not what I wanted to hear. Every author wants to go straight to the top. You want to be on the Today Show, and I've been on the Today Show before. And you want that kind of exposure. And I was really discouraged when she told me that until I started reflecting back I started reflecting back over my past experiences. And I thought, wait a minute. I've done lots of national publicity. I've gotten lots of international publicity. And not once was it because I went after national publicity or international publicity. It was always because I had focused locally. And that led to national publicity. I'm working on a course called How I Got on the Today Show Without Even Trying. And that's a whole nother topic, but I'll just give you the 15-second version of it, because this works for everyone. How to get on the Today Show without even trying. They called and asked for an interview, and I said yes. That's the inside secrets. Hope you'll remember that. Pass that on to your clients. But all the national media that I got was a result of local media. And let me give you just one example, and then we'll break down these 5 reasons why we should focus on local media. Just one example. I led a nonprofit, and we had a controversy going on with a local government agency that was wanting to cancel our lease of government-owned property. Well, if you've ever dealt with government agencies and leases, it's a nightmare of red tape. And so they called. They said, "Yeah, we're going to cancel your lease." Well, they didn't have a legal right to do that. And I didn't have $100,000 to spend fighting them. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? We can't afford a high-powered attorney to come in and represent us and stop them. And I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to send out a press release to our local newspaper. So I put together just a simple release. Here's what's happening. Here's what the situation is. Here's what they're threatening to do. And I just sent that to our local newspaper. Well, they thought it was interesting, and they sent out Rick Neal, a reporter with Florida Today, and Rick came out, and Rick said, yeah, I want to do an interview. My editor told me about this. He passed it on to me, and I want to do an interview. So Rick came out, did the interview. We made Sunday's paper front page above the fold. I was shocked but thrilled. And I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see what the government agency's response is to that. And then not only did we make front page of the paper, but because we made the front page of the paper, how many of you know, whether some of them may not admit it, but television stations read newspapers to see what the news is a lot of times. I mean, they just do. Because as soon as that appeared, guess who started calling? Well, it was NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, Bright House, all the Orlando, and I'm an hour from Orlando, all the Orlando television affiliates started calling. And they said, yeah, we saw this paper, we wanted to do an interview. And so within a week, they had all come, 4 or 5 stations had come for TV interviews that they ran over and over and over. Well, that got more attention, so the reporter that did the story said, can I come back out and do a follow-up? Sure, come back out and do a follow-up. And again, we were already building a relationship there, and so he came back out, did a follow-up. Well, then it hit the AP wire. Now, local reporters love when their story, especially a guy that's just grinding it out. I mean, he's just doing story after story after story, reporting on all kinds of local news. But when they get picked up by the wire services, it is, a feather in their cap. They are thrilled. So Rick's excited. He comes back and wants to do another follow-up and another follow-up and another follow-up. Well, once it hit AP wire, you know what happens. That went everywhere. Washington Times, New York Post, Chicago Sun-Times, I mean, newspapers. An old friend of mine from school, Jong-Ho Kim, emailed me. I hadn't seen him in years. Jong-Ho interviewed me and said, Bruce, I just saw your picture. I've been wondering what's happened to you since school. I just saw your picture on the front page of our paper in Seoul, Korea. So 11 other countries that I know of, I can't read the article from Seoul, but he sent me a screenshot of it. 11 countries ran news, over 200 radio stations, newspapers, TV shows, and all because it was a local story, local newspaper, AP picks it up. Then because the local Fox affiliate covered it and did 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 interviews, all of a sudden on Monday morning, after Fox was out on a Sunday, we're doing an interview, Monday morning, Fox and Friends. This is national exposure. One of my staff members at the time, his mom lived in Dallas, and she called and she said, Luke, I just saw Bruce on Fox and Friends. He said, what's going on? He said, on the news out here in Dallas. I mean, Fox and Friends is national. But all of that happened because one press release, because I was involving the media, letting them know what was going on, and they jumped on it. And it literally, I have seen that happen over and over and over and over. How by focusing on local media, I've gotten tons of national and international publicity. So let's look at these 5 reasons to focus locally. 5 reasons to become a big fish in a small pond. And the first one is this: local media is just easier to get. I mean, you send your story idea to the New York Times, they're not going to open it. They don't even know who you are, they're not going to open it. You send it to your local paper, especially if you have a relationship there, and they're going to read it, they're going to consider it. It's just a lot easier to get on local TV than national TV. A lot easier to get on local talk radio than national talk radio. It's just so much easier for everyday clients, for everyday business owners, for authors, healthcare professionals, realtors, lawyers, whatever it is. So much easier to get local publicity than national. And there's just so much less competition. The second reason is that local media is easier to dominate. You know, I dominated the media for a month because it started local. And just, you know, once the local people see that national people, Fox affiliate sees that Fox and Friends has picked up a story, guess what they want to do? They want to come back out and interview you again. And so it literally creates not a ripple effect, but it can create kind of a tsunami effect. It's just easier to dominate. We had a time back in the 90s where the nonprofit that I led, we were in the newspaper 26 days in a 30-day period. 26 days. And it started with letters to the editor, and then it was an op-ed, and then it was an interview, and then it was a feature, and then it was the response to all that, and just over and over and over, just getting the message out there. It's so much easier to dominate local publicity. Third reason is local publicity is more targeted to the most likely clients. If you've got local clients, then sure, they would love to have national publicity, but the reality is that will do them good, but their clients probably live here. They live where they are. And so they're more likely to see that local publicity. It's more likely to actually connect them with clients, help them grow their business, which is the whole purpose to begin with. Fourth reason to focus locally, become a big fish in a small pond, is that local media builds your brand faster. It doesn't take many articles in the paper, many interviews on talk radio, many interviews on local TV before people say, I know who you are. I know who you are. And isn't it interesting? I mean, it's part of what I love about publicity versus advertising is, you know, I know who certain people in my community are from their advertising. They dominate it. They've built their brand. They hammer it to you. You know, I don't know if you get Appliance Direct commercials down here, but Sam Pack up in Melbourne owns the airwaves. I mean, he buys every infomercial slot. He buys every commercial slot. He'll run 24 hours in a row sometimes with his infomercials about his appliances. He's built his brand, but nobody likes it. People go, oh, those obnoxious, oh my gosh, those obnoxious commercials, those obnoxious, oh, nobody likes it. It's not, you know, it may be getting him some business, but it's not building his brand in a way that everybody goes, oh yeah, go there for appliances. No, they're afraid if you go there, somebody's going to yell at you and say, you paid too much. You know, nobody wants that. But when we get an ongoing flow of media publicity, then it builds the brand in a positive way. People, I've heard about you. Yes, I want to know that. You know, we'll talk in a few minutes about some different types of press releases that I've used, but one of them got us a community paper, front page, almost full page article with a picture of my wife Valerie and I. And we walked into, we were visiting a new church up in Vieira, just north of Melbourne, church of about 1,500 people. We walk in on one Sunday morning, we didn't know anybody there, sat down, and a lady walks in and sits beside us, and she looks at us and says, oh, I know you guys, because we'd just been on the front page of her community paper, just a community paper, but she immediately knew, you know, what our story was about. She immediately knew who we were. So it builds your brand faster. And then the fifth reason to focus on local media is that it really can lead to national media. You know, I gave you one example of that talking about just that one press release and what happened with it and how it went literally around the world. But again, all the national publicity I've ever gotten has all come because of local publicity. Because if you pitch your client or you pitch your own brand, you pitch your own product, you pitch it to national media and they don't know you, you're number 1 out of 5 million a day. But when they're looking, they're planning, the producers or the bookers are planning a show, they're planning an article, they're planning a topic, and they start looking for people. And when they find you online, because local publicity, and we'll talk about this in a minute, how to make it perpetual, how to have it publicity keep getting results over and over and over, but local publicity is available to everyone thanks to the internet. And so they can find a local story that you did, and they can watch a local TV interview, and they can listen to a local radio show and say, that would be a great guest for the segment we've got coming up. And national publicity explodes. And so, you know, the goal is for most businesses, for most nonprofits that you might represent, focus locally. But just know, it doesn't mean you won't get national publicity, because literally, I've gotten millions of dollars. I can't even begin to calculate. I tried one day, and I just kept going, well, how much is a minute on that show cost? Well, how much? I mean, it's just unbelievable. Over 30 years of national and international publicity, all because of focusing locally. Now, I mentioned that the one story there, the one press release, that all of that happened, over 200 radio stations, TV shows, newspapers, that all of that happened as a result of one press release. So I'd like to talk about some kind of spins on press releases that I've used that have led to getting media to contact me over and over and over. Because, you know, I know in many cases people's experiences with press releases is we send out a press release and we get a headshot and a paragraph or two on the business section back, you know, several pages in. And so I've been able to use press releases to get major publicity by just kind of viewing them in a different way. And so the first thing that I do with a press release, one of the first benefits, is to use it for expert positioning. You know, when I first started leading a nonprofit, no one had heard of me, no one cared about that particular nonprofit, the media sure didn't care, but what I started doing was every time there was any story in the news related to our area of interest, I would do a press release with my commentary on that. My take on this national story that just broke, or this national court decision, or whatever it was. I would give my take on that, and I'd send it to our local media. Well, as they begin seeing, oh, here's a guy, local guy, with a perspective on statewide, regional, national events, what begins to happen is, as you do that frequently, they begin to assume you're an expert. This person, at least, they may not be an expert. I don't know them yet, perhaps, but what I know is they've got a perspective. They've got a local voice as it relates to national news. What do local media love? Local voices speaking to bigger, regional, statewide, national events. And so I began just every time there was anything in the news, here's our perspective. Here's our perspective. Here's our perspective. And all of a sudden it starts getting picked up. Well, then it completely turned around to where I didn't have to send out press releases with my perspective, because after the first interview or two, and whether you do interviews for your group or whether your clients do interviews, you know, reporters, whether they're newspaper, radio, TV, they love go-to guests. They love, I can call and get a soundbite, or I can call and we can send a crew over and get something for the news this evening. They love knowing someone that can speak well on camera, that can do a good job. And so once I started getting the first few interviews, I didn't have to send press releases out. We still did, but I didn't have to anymore because they would call me. I can't tell you how many calls I got when I didn't even know what the national news story was. I hadn't seen it yet. But I'd get a call and say, hey, Bruce, we wanted to get your take on what just happened in Washington. Well, I didn't know what happened, so I'd say, well, tell me exactly. I'd ask a few questions so I'd know what it was. But they would come out. I mean, over and hundreds of interviews. There were times when literally, thanks to caller ID, I wouldn't answer the phone sometimes because it would just literally take away from my family time. I'd say, oh, it's channel 2 again. Oh, it's channel 6 again. Oh, it's channel 9. Oh, it's, I've done enough interviews this week, or I've done enough interviews this month. And sometimes I wouldn't even answer. That begins to happen as you develop your voice in whatever area of business, whatever area of nonprofit. As you begin to develop your voice, they start contacting you. And that even when it gets overload, which very few people would ever consider there'd be too many calls from the media, but even when that happens, it's so much more fun to have someone call and say, can we interview you, than for you to have to go out and try to get them to come cover your story. And so that using press releases for expert positioning, just perspective on national events, is huge. Second, there we go. Second way that I use press releases is for search engine optimization. And I've done lots of search engine optimization for other clients, but press releases, despite Google's latest algorithms where they've tried to attack people that were using press releases just for search engine optimization, press releases are great because they, in almost every case, they live on forever. Once they're online, they live on forever, and the online distribution services usually rank very well with Google, which means the likelihood of your name, your brand, your client showing up when someone's searching escalates tremendously. And so when media are looking for someone to interview and they Google the topic, if you're there with, hey, they've had 5 press releases related to that, I'm going to call that guy. I'm going to call and interview them. So press releases are just a great way to increase internet presence, even if local conventional media is not noticing them. Just to have them online is extremely valuable. And then the third, as I mentioned this briefly, is press release articles. How many of you know budgets are tight? Most members of the media are low on payroll, short on time. I mean, just tight. And so I have frequently written I call it a press release. It's an article. It's an interview with me or with whatever the topic is. And it's got all the quotes. It's even got pictures. And I send that. And local community newspapers frequently will use that as is. Or if I didn't send a picture, they'll say, do you have a picture to go with that? Because they can't even afford to send a photographer out sometimes. But if you can serve them by providing them with an article, and they may edit it some, or I've had them take literally word for word because they left my typos in. But literally, they'll run that entire article and they'll use those pictures. And community newspapers sometimes aren't looked at as being as valuable, but I've found that the people that get them, if they're free weekly newspaper in your mailbox type of thing, they read those. People really read those. And I've gotten tremendous response and attendance to events and all kinds of things because of that type of coverage. And it was all because I wrote it, I sent it to them. I wouldn't begin to do that for upper tier people. They'd be offended that you suggested they run your story, basically. But I've gotten so much press from those. And then every one of those is used to get more attention. Because maybe the bigger newspapers, the bigger outlets, they see those articles and they call and say, hey, we'd like to do a story. We saw that in the Vieira Sun-Times. We saw that in Senior Life. We saw that in whatever the local paper or magazine was. So by using press releases to develop expert positioning, by using press releases as articles, by using them for SEO, it really kind of keeps the incoming requests for media just rolling in over and over and over. And then just one last thought there, and then we've got a couple of minutes left for questions. Here's how all of this becomes perpetual. Here's how all of that work can just continue bringing in results. Every interview, it doesn't matter if it's the smallest radio station, doesn't matter if it's the smallest newspaper, the smallest TV show, every interview, you, your clients, you need to get a copy of it. Don't put a link to that article on a website. That link won't be there forever. Don't put a link to a TV clip. That page may change. But download the videos. Google Chrome has plugins. You can download almost any video online. Get a copy of the MP3 file if it's radio, and they'll almost always provide that for you. Make a PDF of the article, and then all of those things you get launched back onto the client's websites, or I use them on my websites, so people can see, oh, here's an interview, here's an interview, here's an interview. So it all becomes part of a media kit. But then also, if I am pitching someone, you know, I recently was accepted to write for a large national online news service. And I said, here's copies of articles. Here's a copy of an article I did on CNN's iReport. Here's a copy I did on, you know, and I just link and show them those things. So a radio, little interviews, show a big radio producer, what do you sound like? What's your client sound like? Oh, they were a great guest? Okay, we'll have them. I just had a reporter from Orlando call me, and she saw a video I did on a live appearance at Fox in Orlando. She saw it 3 years later, said, I can't believe I've never heard of you before. I want to do, you know, and she writes for 2 different publications in Orlando. She said, I want to do a story, you know, right away for this. So as we take all the collection of media and we can let it remain online, we control it, it helps get ongoing media. And as we serve, instead of trying to sell, we build relationships that just bring request after request after request after request.